Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Dr. Karen Wyatt. Thanks for joining me here today. This is, of course, the relaunched podcast. It's been on hiatus for about a year and a half now, but I'm happy to say here we are. I'm back again and back just to share with you some of my thoughts and ideas and even my own personal growth experiences around spirituality. And today I'm going to talk about why spirituality matters now more than ever. And so I want to acknowledge the moment that we're living in right now, which is so significant. At least in my lifetime, it's really unheard of and unfathomable in a way that we are dealing with so many crises all at once, a world at war. We're witnessing heartbreaking inhumanity at home and throughout the world. There are climate disasters and grief over climate change, social fragmentation, economic challenges, political extremism, spiritual disillusionment. It's really affecting every area of our lives, and every area of existence on this planet is going through some kind of tension and stress and challenge right now. We're witnessing collapse as we have never seen before. And not just in the outer world around us, the external world, many of us are experiencing some sort of collapse within. And I'm hearing more and more people talking about their loss of meaning and purpose, not being able to navigate everything that's happening or find their way. And that the values that used to guide most of us do not seem relevant now. We're struggling to find a system, a framework in a way that tells us how do we negotiate these times? How do we navigate how to be with ourselves, how to be with other people and treat other people? And the truth is that for many of us, religion is not meeting the need. It's not helping us find purpose. It's not helping us grow. It's not helping us heal from trauma. And in fact, for some people, religion has been the source of trauma. And so I know there are people who find solace and have found transformation in religion, and I'm happy for them. And I encourage that if that's where you are, if you are already peaceful and finding meaning and support within a religion, I encourage you to continue that and stay there. But I'm really speaking here to all those of us who've been disenchanted with religion or have just never resonated with it and have gone along on our own paths without relying on religion, but now find ourselves floundering a little bit. And so that's the purpose of this entire podcast, is to talk about how we can find a spiritual path for ourselves that's not tied to religion and doesn't even require a belief in God. It's having a framework and some practices that help us negotiate these challenging times. So looking at this, we are facing, I believe, a crisis of grief. We're going through ancestral, global, historical, personal grief. We're looking at grief that's been buried for years and years, decades, centuries, that needs to come to the surface. It is rising to the surface, but many of us have no tools for handling the grief that is coming up for us and the grief we're witnessing around us. And so that's part of the goal of this podcast, to support us through that grief process, because that's been a big part of my life, is working on a journey of grief. We're going through a crisis of meaning. As I said before, many people are struggling to find meaning in a time when things are crumbling around us and falling apart. If the meaning and value of our own lives has depended on the external world, and everything's crumbling in that world, it can be challenging to find something to hold on to. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is to help each of us go within and find our own meaning and our own purpose for life by doing an inward journey within. We are also going through a crisis of our moral framework. As I mentioned already, we lack a guidance system that I think we used to believe was there. I think we used to believe it was generally accepted that we had a sense of how to treat other people and what's right or wrong or good or bad behavior. We had a sense of that, and that is all collapsing around us now. In some ways, it's because we're losing our black and white definitions of everything. Things are becoming grayer and moving toward the middle. But for many people, they have not retained a strong sense of a moral compass, of a guidance system that says, I don't care what anyone else says, I am not going to harm another person. I'm not going to treat other people badly. And so that's the kind of framework that we need to shore up and strengthen. And I'm hoping this podcast will be part of that as well. So what I'm saying is that we need a new form of spirituality, and we need it soon because we are in the midst of a precarious time when a lot of things are on the line here. A lot of things are on the verge of collapsing and falling apart. The stronger we can become, the more we can go within and strengthen our own sense of self, our own ability to love, our own ability to heal trauma and grief, the more we'll be able to rise to the occasion as these changes happen in the external world. So we need a form of spirituality that addresses our trauma and pain, that helps us look at our fear of our own mortality, our fear of death, which underlies so many of the issues that are happening for our society right now. We need to be able to look at our grief and learn how to carry it and hold it and acknowledge it out in the open. And we need to be able to find our way through our lack of meaning and clarity. I'm inspired to do this podcast for one reason, because I've been walking this road for a long time. I've been a spiritual seeker for my whole life, even since I was a little child. I've been a hospice doctor for most of my medical career and sat at the bedside of people who were dying and learned from them what really matters in life, which is where the name of this podcast came from. They taught me what matters, and it's not income, it's not material wealth, it's not achievement or success. None of those things matter at all to people at the end of life. What matters are relationships and love and forgiveness and truth and integrity and gratitude. So I want to share with you all of those things that I've learned through my own personal path and through my life in this podcast. And so I want to look at it just briefly as we carry on with this episode. What does it mean to live what I call a soulful life in these times? What does it mean to live from your soul? And Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that quote, which you may have heard before in other contexts, really flips the script a little bit and puts the focus on the fact that we are here to have a spiritual experience. And many of us have compartmentalized spirituality into a little box where, well, I may look at that occasionally. Every now and then I'll dip into that. I'll check it out. But in fact, that spiritual experience is the real reason that we're here, the real purpose for all of this life. And all of the external material things we have put our energy into are secondary. They're only there to help support our journey into ourselves, into our own souls, and into our own, finding our own higher consciousness and our own best selves within. And so that's something that I want to keep exploring with you, is how do we live a life that supports the growth of our soul? And what is required here is what some people call the inward arc or an inner journey. It's necessary that we go inside ourselves in order to look at our own shadows, to look at who we really are. And for many people, this is considered the second half of life journey, that we spend the first half of our lives on the outward arc, focusing on our jobs and careers and what we want to accomplish and achieving success and accumulating material goods and money. And that in the second half of life, we begin to turn inward. But the thing is, the impetus to take this inward journey is actually happening at a much younger age now. It's happening even before midlife for many of us. And that's because of the crises that are happening around us in the world. The necessity of looking within, it is a necessity. It's no longer a luxury. We're being asked to take this inward journey and look at ourselves now rather than waiting until we turn 50 or something. We're being asked to do it wherever we are, whatever age we are. It's not age related. It is related to our own calling of our soul to pay attention and to begin to grow and to begin to look at what really matters in our own lives. And this inward journey for each one of us is actually what the entire world needs from us, for change to happen, for growth to happen. The whole world needs as many of us as possible to begin to grow and evolve in our consciousness. And so more and more of us are being called to this journey to look within. I want to be here to support people for whom this is a new concept, who maybe have not been working on this for all of their lives, but they feel called to it now. And I want to be here to provide resources and practices and thoughts and ideas, things that I've learned, things I've tried, things I'm struggling with right now, things that have helped me on this journey, in hopes that maybe they will be helpful to you. Because it's important that we move on now past the distractions of the outer world. There's a tendency to bypass the inner life and bypass our spirituality, but we can't do that anymore. We can't afford that. We can't afford to live on the surface. We need to dive into the depths and do the work that's waiting for us there. And throughout the past years, I've been writing books. I started with 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, which was also at one time titled What Really Matters. And that's where the framework for these spiritual lessons I'm going to talk about comes from. And I mentioned that already. My next book was called The Journey from Ego to Soul, which follows up on those same 7 lessons, but talks about how we actually put those into practice in our lives. How do we actually forgive in our day-to-day life? How do we actually live in the present moment? What does it take for us to bring that? We can have an awareness that it's important, but how do we actually do it day to day and make it part of our lives? So that's what the Journey from Ego to Soul is. I also have a book called The Tao of Death, which is a more mystical, spiritual book. It's an adaptation of the Tao Te Ching, but it is a meditative, contemplative book that helps us look at death and dying and grief. And it's a book you can use to inspire journaling if that's something that you like to do. And I have a new book that's coming out very soon called Wild and Holy, A Journey Through Grief, Guilt, and Grace in Italy. And I'm really excited to share this with you because it tells the story of my own pilgrimage through grief, really deep, deep grief, and that I'm still on. I'm still working through it, still in process, but with hopefully a lot of experiences and wisdom that I've gained that may be helpful to other people who are turning to look at their grief. And I'm talking about grief that's been stored for a long time. That grief I mentioned before, the ancestral, historical, personal grief that's in the depths of us, stored deep in our hearts, and how we begin to unearth that and take a look at it and embrace it and make it part of ourselves. So that's what the book Wild and Holy is about. So there are a couple of points I want to make about what kind of spirituality is needed right now. And the very first point I want to tell you is it must be death-aware spirituality. It's so essential. The very first step of all of this work is that we have to look at ourselves for who we are. We're spiritual beings, but we are within human bodies that are fragile, and we have a fleeting life that doesn't last forever, and we have a short amount of time to learn everything we can and to grow in spiritual ways that are possible. And we need to always be aware of our mortality, always be aware of the presence of death in life, because that is the truth. That's the only way to live honestly in this world, is to carry with us that knowledge that I am going to die someday, and I don't even know how soon. I don't even know when. But every moment that I'm here matters. Every single thing I do, every word I say makes a difference, because this life is short and precious. And when you walk through life with that awareness that I'm holding on to whatever days are given to me, and it's my job to make them as beautiful and filled with love and as meaningful as possible, because I don't even know how many days there will be. That's the beginning of this whole inward arc, and the whole spiritual path is finally acknowledging life is finite, death is present for all of us, and it will be my time one day. And so the goal is to be able to live with that awareness without fear, because fear causes us to shut down. Fear causes us to compartmentalize, to lock that knowledge away and not utilize it for the rich fertilizer it is for our growth. So the number one step and the number one goal is to be death aware. And everything that I talk about on the End of Life University podcast is about this death awareness and helping people confront their fears, helping them just learn information and find out what's out there in the world and what's going on, and how other people are navigating death and loss and grief, how they're preparing for their own end of life, and what kinds of options are out there and available to us. That's all contained within the End of Life University podcast, and I encourage you to listen to that podcast if you're interested in that. But this podcast, what really matters is where we go beyond, we add extra pieces to that death awareness. And the very next step is to become ego wise. This is what was covered in the book, The Journey from Ego to Soul, is for each of us to understand our own egos, which is part of our lower consciousness, part of our lower self, and understanding how the ego operates, but also how to transcend the ego, because we have an option. We can be driven by our ego, and that means the ego is in charge of our decisions and our behavior, and therefore we are subject to the fickleness and the inconsistencies of the ego, the emotions, and our behavior will reflect that, and how we show up in the world will reflect the health of our ego. And for most of us, the ego is somewhat healthy, but also contains a lot of shadow, a lot of trauma, a lot of wounds that need to be healed. So when we live in an ego-wise way, we're aware of our ego, we're aware of its wounds, we're aware of our shadow. But we also know how to manage the ego so that it doesn't drive our decisions and our behavior in the world. We know how to listen to our higher guidance, because it is our higher selves, our intuitive selves, our more spiritual selves that have already come here with a certain amount of wisdom and are tapped in. And it's our higher selves that benefit from this kind of spiritual exploration and study. Our higher selves can just thrive on that and give us the guidance and the framework that we need in order to make the best possible decisions for ourselves, for other people, for our planet. It's our higher selves that have the answers and the guidance that we need, and some people don't even know that they have a higher self. And that's a crucial step, is to begin to recognize that there is a part of you that witnesses everything that you do. There's a part of you that's always in the background, always looking out and looking over and seeing everything that you do. That is the part of you that is your higher self. That's the part of you we want to help you get in touch with, so that you can grow that part and strengthen it and learn how to listen to your own guidance, learn how to listen to the frameworks that are present within that higher self that can help you when you go through a crisis and when you're floundering and you can't find the meaning. Turning to your higher self is where you will find your bearings once again, and you'll be able to see more clearly the map in front of you and where you need to go, or maybe just at least the next step that you need to take. And you'll also find the wisdom to soothe your own nervous system when it's been traumatized. You'll find the higher clarity and the higher calmness that you need to help heal your nervous system, heal the trauma that you've experienced. So this is becoming ego-wise, aware of your ego, and that helps you also see more clearly what part of you is not ego, and that is your higher self. So that's the second goal. The third is to become rooted in love, to make love the highest good of your entire life, and in some ways to make love the main focus of everything that you do. It can become the measuring stick you use for your behavior. If you're weighing a decision that you have to make about two different choices, look at each one and think, which one is the most loving? Which one would bring more love into the world? And that becomes your guidance. That's a quick and easy way right now, before you've grown all the other tools, to stop sometimes and just think it over. Am I acting out of love right now? Is this a loving thing to do or say? Or am I acting out of my trauma or a wound? Am I acting out of old anger or bitterness or grief? Am I acting out of fear right now? Because love transcends all of those things, and love is what we need to empower within ourselves and in our world right now. And I know it sounds trite, and I know we hear it so often that it almost doesn't seem to have any meaning anymore, but when I talk about love, I'm talking about the force that created the entire universe. Every tiny atom and particle of the universe came from love. And it's big and it's huge and it's even beyond our understanding and beyond my words to describe. And it's not just saccharine or sentimental or something without meaning. It's everything. And so when I talk about love, it's with a capital L. And I will keep emphasizing that, and I will keep talking about ways that we can recognize love in the world and in ourselves and empower it and activate it within our own lives. So these are my 3 goals: to be death aware, to be ego wise, and to be rooted in love. And so I'm going to be talking a lot about practices for those. Being death aware, we need practices that help us sit with our grief. We need to understand, what have we lost in our lives that we still ache over inside? There's still a part of us crying and sobbing because of something we lost that hurt us and that broke our hearts so much. We need to bring the grief to the surface and learn how to carry it and hold it. We need to learn how to breathe through our grief, and simple breathing practices like breathing in for a count of 6 and out for a count of 8 is one of the quickest ways to soothe the nervous system. It shifts you into the parasympathetic nervous system and creates the relaxation response in your body. That simple tool of deep breathing with a longer exhale than inhale, that simple tool can change things in the moment quickly. Even just one breath can make a huge difference. And so that becomes something you learn how to practice throughout the day. Maybe before you go to bed at night, you do some of this prolonged exhale breathing before you go to sleep, because you're teaching your body how to do it. You're creating synapses in the brain that will help you remember and recall, oh, do the breathing, do the breathing, do the breathing. And you're training your nervous system to get into this state of relaxation, which will help you sleep better at night, but will help you when you're confronting grief and pain. This breathing practice is going to be an invaluable tool. And then next, when we look at being able to handle our ego, here's a simple question to ask yourself, because the ego's biggest flaw is that it wants to be in charge of everything and wants to control everything about you and everything about the world around it, and believes that it should control everything. And the ego is very attached to outcomes. So the ego then tends to go up and down like a roller coaster in emotions, because when control is working and things seem to be going well, there can be a heightened sense of elation and pleasure and joy. But as soon as there's a sign that it's not going to work and the roller coaster comes back down, the ego can get deflated and depressed and angry and resentful and start blaming other people for what's happening. So our egos kind of drag us back and forth from highs to lows to highs again, and really exhaust us and wear us out with the ego reactions to the things that happen in our lives. And so to rise above the ego, I have just one simple question that sometimes can help us. It kind of stops the ego in its tracks a little bit, is to say, what if it's all perfect just as it is? And to ask that, particularly when things are going wrong, when the ego is very upset and not happy with how life is working out. But to ponder this question, what if it's actually all perfect just the way it is, and I just can't see it right now? What if I just can't see how this is going to work out? But what if it's fine? What if it's going to be okay? And I'm wasting all this energy getting upset, and it's actually going to be fine. And in some ways, I ask this question from a really stable place of equanimity, kind of in the middle, because even in times when the ego wants to feel elated because something is going its way, it can be helpful to say, well, okay, what if it is? It's good. That's good for right now. That's good. But to also acknowledge, things don't always go this high. Things don't always go this perfectly. And to begin to pull in the extremes, the extreme highs and lows of the ego to a more middle space, the third way, the middle way, where we try to stay in a more even keel. And I like this question. I ask myself this sometimes. Wait a minute, I'm awfulizing this event. And what if it's actually all perfect, just the way it is? Why don't I let go of my complaints and my blame and my disappointment and just sit with it for a while and let it be and see what happens next? And then the third step is to remember love in our everyday life. And I like to have little touch points for love, things that remind me to experience love. I carry little stones with me sometimes, or I wear a bracelet or a necklace that for me is a sign of love. So it's there, it's tangible, I can feel it. It reminds me of love. And then the simplest practice that you can do to enhance love is simply place one hand over your heart. This small, tiny little act actually activates the release of oxytocin, which is called the love hormone. It's called the connection hormone, that helps you feel more peaceful and more loving toward others and more open to relationships. But that simple act, just put your hand on your heart, and it actually helps you feel calmer, feel more open, and more loving within yourself. So I've given you 3 of the tiniest little practices: deep breathing, saying, what if it's all perfect? And just putting your hand or both hands even over your heart just for a few moments. Combine that with some deep breaths and also saying, what if it's all perfect? That's a knockout right there. You're doing all three at once. That's a tiny little practice. I just wanted to share that with you because we all need these things. We all need reminders. We all need little tools we can have with us in our day-to-day lives that get us through, because life is full of challenges and a lot of awful things are happening right now. And if you sit down occasionally like I do and dip into the news or even looking at social media sites, sometimes I feel so bombarded with negativity and pain and suffering when I look at those sites. I need tools that can pull me away from that and pull me back to a place of more equanimity and more positivity. So I wanted to give you in today's episode those three tools. That's just an example. In future episodes, we'll talk about tons of things. We're going to go into depth in a lot more ways, but I always want to be offering little tools, little things that have worked for me. So before we go, I'll just quickly share that I restarted this podcast because of some pretty profound healing that has taken place in my life. I've been on a really amazing journey. The last year and a half, I stopped doing the podcast at the beginning of 2024. I had a major health episode with my heart that occurred shortly after that. I've been dealing with that for all this time since then. I developed a heart arrhythmia that was permanent, that they said I would always have, was never going to get better. And the full word is not out on this, but as of 2 days ago, my heart spontaneously, on its own, with nothing else happening, shifted back into normal rhythm. And I can't not even begin to explain that. I'll tell you more later as more information comes in and I deal with it. But for me, this has been a personal journey of health in the last year and a half. I've been working on my growth and my healing, as particularly of grief and guilt, as I've written the book, Wild and Holy. And then suddenly, as I finish that book, bam, my heart shifts back into a normal rhythm, at least for now. That's where we are right now. I don't know for sure where it's headed from here. But that reminded me, like, hey, I want to talk about these things. This is really powerful stuff. And I've learned so much, and I can't wait to share it for anyone who might also benefit from listening to this. So once again, EOLU Podcast, End of Life University. I'll be interviewing people there. We'll be talking all about death in particular, grief, end of life issues, and you'll learn a ton from all the interviews I do. It's an amazing library and archive there right now of over 500 episodes. This podcast, it's just a solo podcast of me talking, but I'll be sharing these insights with you, tools, growth experiences. And for this podcast, I'd love to hear anything that you would like me to talk about or that you think would be beneficial. I would love to hear feedback from you. And there is a website for this podcast that is linked in the show notes, and you can go there if you want to leave some questions or comments for me. Coming up in the next episode, I'm going to review the 7 lessons, which are from my book, 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, and talk about that as how those lessons work as a spiritual framework. And there's a lot of things I'm exploring for myself, AI and spirituality right now, which has been really fun. I'll talk a lot more about grief, and I'll tell some stories from my writing and other life. And I'm excited for you to come along on this journey. And as I said, send me your comments or thoughts or ask me questions or things that you'd like to talk about. And finally, I've created a special tier on Patreon for anyone who wants to make financial contribution. And if you just started listening, you're not there yet. Don't worry about that. But if you feel like you want to become part of the Patreon community, I have a tier there called Soul Supporter, SOUL. And people who join at that tier level, I'll be giving you a lot of extra bonuses and things from this podcast and also from my Soul Code Substack series, where things like journaling prompts and reflections and tools, other things that you can use as the bonuses for the Soul Supporter tier on Patreon. But don't even worry about that. That's only if you feel motivated down the road to make a contribution. So what I hope to say to you as we leave this podcast right now is that when you begin your inward journey, I hope that you find yourself feeling at home there, that you recognize, oh, this is where I've needed to be all along. This is the place I need to be. I'm inside myself now. I'm finding all my own beauty and my own pain and my own trauma, but this is really me. And this is where I've always needed to be. And I hope that that journey will sustain you as the world continues to shift around all of us. And so I will leave you with my usual tagline to remember that we're here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life has in store for you next, and love each and every moment of your very precious life.